If we haven't met yet, I'm Lori, a mostly solo traveler. I recently returned from a solo trip to Paris, which included 48 hours at Disneyland Paris. I landed at Charles de Gaulle Airport and took the magical shuttle to Disney's Hotel New York, The Art of Marvel. I had to wait about 10 minutes for the bus to arrive, and it took about an hour to get to the hotel since we made stops at other hotels along the way. If you're coming from central Paris, it can be about an hour or more on public transportation, so I definitely suggest staying at one of the Disney area hotels for at least a night or two. I spent a few nights after Disneyland in central Paris, and I have a separate video about that coming soon, so be sure to subscribe if that's something you want to see. It was too early to check in, so the hotel stored my luggage. The Marvel Hotel is a 5-ish minute walk to the parks, and you go through Disney Village, which is Paris's downtown Disney or Disney Springs equivalent. My first stop was Parc Walt Disney Studios. This is Disneyland Paris's equivalent of Hollywood Studios. Because I was worried about cramming everything I wanted to see in just 2 days, I had pre-purchased Premier Access Ultimate for the first day. It gives you express access to all the rides, and honestly, it was helpful, but I didn't need it. Pro tip, save yourself the money and wait till you arrive to assess the situation and see whether or not you really need to buy it. I was there in January, which is off season, and it was cold and rainy, so the crowds were low, which worked in my favor, but also it was cold and rainy, so yeah. I headed straight for Crush's Coaster, and honestly, I found it to be a little bit underwhelming. The queue theming was cute, but the ride itself wasn't super exciting. My strategy for visiting new Disney parks is to do a lot of research and prioritize the rides that we don't have or are substantially different from those that we have at Walt Disney World. So my priorities for Parc Walt Disney Studios were Crush's Coaster, Avengers Assemble Flight Force Coaster, Spider-Man Web Adventure, and Tower of Terror. After that, I wandered over to Avengers Campus. It was cold and raining pretty hard at this point, and I was fighting jet lag and I was hungry, so I was hoping to find a sit-down meal. I was able to do a walk-up for Pim's Kitchen, which is definitely one of the benefits of traveling solo. It was cute to see all the themed dishes and decor, and the food was fine, pretty typical for buffet food. Sitting and getting warm and having a Coke for caffeine went a long way towards boosting my energy. So I headed across the way to Spider-Man Web Adventure. This is a super fun ride. Think Toy Story Mania or Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin, but you use your hands to shoot webs instead of something that's attached to the ride vehicle. After that, I rode Avengers Assemble Flight Force, which was an awesome roller coaster. Then, considering it was still raining and pouring, I headed over to the Tower of Terror. I feel like this version focuses a lot more heavily on the little girl, and the ride vehicle stays in the elevator shaft and doesn't drive into the hotel like it does in Orlando. It was definitely a solid Tower of Terror experience, but the Tower of Terror at Tokyo Disney Sea in Japan remains my favorite version of the ride. At this point, I was starting to feel like I wasn't really at Disney because I hadn't seen the castle. My ticket was a park hopper, and much like in California, the two park entrances at Disneyland Paris are right across from each other. The entrance to Disneyland is right under the Disneyland Hotel, which is a big, gorgeous hotel. It's shocking to me how few turnstiles there are to enter the park and how uncrowded it was. I know it was low season, but either the entry lines get incredibly long in peak season, or they just get so few guests compared to Walt Disney World that it just works. One of the nice things about Disneyland Paris is the arcades. On each side of Main Street, running parallel to it, is a covered arcade, basically a covered walkway. There's toilets, benches, and you can access the shops from the covered arcades. But more importantly, you can get out of the rain while you walk towards the castle. These came in very handy during my trip. For Disneyland Park, my priorities were seeing the castle. Unlike other Disney castles, there are things to see inside Le Château de la Belle au Bois de Monts, aka Sleeping Beauty Castle, and I'm sorry if my pronunciation is terrible, I tried my best. I wanted to get champagne on Main Street. Spoiler alert, this didn't happen because the cart was never there. Maybe it's a seasonal thing. I also wanted to see Phantom Manor, Star Wars Hyperspace Mountain, Pirates of the Caribbean, and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Peril. I was also hoping to walk through Alice's Curious Labyrinth and get my photo taken with Mickey in his Phantom Manor costume. It took a little doing to find the entrance to see the dragon. Spoiler alert, it's in one of the shops on the left side of the castle, and I timed it perfectly to see him wake up. After that, I caught a quick bit of the parade completely by accident while heading over to Phantom Manor. This version of Haunted Mansion is a bit spookier than the others that I've seen, and has an odd Western saloon ghost town in the middle of it. I don't speak French, so probably there's some story that I missed out on there, but Haunted Mansion never disappoints. After that, I headed over to Star Wars Hyperspace Mountain, which the fact that it's Star Wars just seems odd because there are parts of the ride and the queue that are Star Wars themed, and other parts that retain the old theming. I definitely wasn't expecting to go upside down, so that was a pleasant surprise. At this point, the sun was starting to go down, and so was my energy. So I went to admire the castle lit up in the fading light, and then headed back to my hotel to crash. The next morning brought more rain. I had 1:45 lunch reservations at Bistro Chez Remy in Parc Walt Disney Studios, but I started my day in Disneyland Paris. I grabbed a hamon beurre, again, I apologize for the pronunciation, from one of the Main Street shops and ate it on a bench in the arcade to stay out of the rain before heading to Adventureland to ride Pirates of the Caribbean. I always love pirates, and this is no exception. However, the storyline is definitely in a different order than it is here in Orlando, leaving me wishing I understood French to understand it better. My next stop was Fantasyland to see Alice's Curious Labyrinth, and this is when the rain turned to snow. Granted, it was a wet snow that only lasted a few minutes, but it was still fun to realize that I was in a Disney park in the snow, which has never happened to me before. It's definitely snowing. It's like that wintry mix of slush and rain where you want it to be more snow and less rain, but here we are. While in Fantasyland, I saw the meet and greet for Mickey, which reminded me that I wanted to see Phantom Manor Mickey, so I headed over to Phantom Manor and got in line. Thankfully, the rain-snow mix had stopped at this point, and I spent about an hour in line waiting to get photos of Mickey in this unique outfit. I told him I was visiting from his summer home in Orlando and that it was much warmer there, and he was crazy to be here in Paris in this weather. Then I rode Indiana Jones, which was fine but nothing spectacular, and Small World, which is exactly what you want it to be, before heading over to Parc Walt Disney Studios. I had gotten a virtual queue spot for the Heroes Meet and Greet in Avengers Campus and got photos with what my friends dubbed low budget Loki. The interaction was good, but the look left a little bit to be desired. Finally, it was time for food. Bistro Chez Remy is adorable. It's a prefix menu and the food was fine, albeit nothing special. My steak could have benefited from some seasoning and the fries were a little bland. For lunch, I'd noticed that the sun was starting to peek through the clouds, and by the time I was finished eating, it was downright sunny. Since I hadn't yet seen the castle in daylight, I hightailed it back over to Disneyland Park to see it in the sunshine before heading back to the hotel for a jet lag-induced nap. I knew I wanted to see the drone show and the fireworks, and grabbing a quick nap was the only way that this was going to happen. Feeling refreshed, I headed back to Disneyland Park and jumped on Star Tours. In general, the lines were longer today than they were yesterday, but still very manageable. Something I didn't realize is that both Adventureland and Fantasyland close about an hour before the park due to the drone show and fireworks. Individual ride closure times are noted in the app, but I didn't put two and two together that the entire lands were closing, and I missed out on a few things that I hope to do because of this. It makes sense as far as safety measures go, but it was definitely something I wish I'd been aware of. Then it was time for the Main Street Electrical Sky Parade. As someone who grew up with the original Main Street Electrical Parade, I was so looking forward to this, and it did not disappoint. It was probably one of my favorite moments of the whole Disneyland Paris trip. And yes, it pains me to put bad copyright-free music over these clips rather than Baroque down, but I don't want to anger the YouTube gods. The following Illuminations fireworks were nice, but the drone show was a star for me. And just like that, my time to Disneyland Paris came to an end. Don't forget to click the like button and make sure to subscribe to see the video from the rest of my trip in Central Paris, which is coming soon.